Welcome to Rebels and Prodigals. My name is Georgia Turner. Viewer discretion is advised for today's episode. We value stewarding the innocence of little ears and little children. So, if they are in your vicinity, we advise you to either wait until they are not or create space between you and them to where they don't hear what we have to say, or you're probably going to have some uncomfortable conversations that you might not have been ready for today. So, without further ado, enjoy today's episode. We welcome Jessica Darling. Let's record. All right. So, this is my friend Jessica. She's from California, living here in Texas now. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's a wonderful mother of two, and she is into quilting now, but we're going to get into what she wants to talk about. So, hi, Jessica.
Hey, good morning, Georgia. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to do this. I know that what you have to say is very powerful and it carries a lot of authority. And yeah, a lot of breakthrough that's going to happen today. So if you want to tell the followers of Rebels and Prodigals a little bit about yourself, and then we can go from there.
Awesome. Okay. So, my name is Jessica Darling, and I am originally from the greater Sacramento area in Northern California. I am the youngest of three sisters. There's three of us. And I grew up really into art. I have been in the textile industry since I was 15 years old. I started out as an after school help in a long arm quilting studio, and it completely took over my life. And it's something that I am still extremely passionate about today. I'm a former quilt shop owner, and I have published over 20 quilting patterns in my career span. So that's something kind of fun about me that you may not have known before. I have two kids. They are awesome. They're 15 months apart. They're 7 and 8. Their names are Mirabelle and Elvis. They're like the coolest people ever. And most of my days is spent now, focusing on raising them and making them into the best people that they can possibly be.
Awesome. Yes. So that's definitely what we like to hear, the entrepreneurial spirit and being a great mother, because family is your first ministry. So,
Yeah,
it,
100%.
yes. So it's not a secret that the title of this is From OnlyFans to Only God. Jessica was also part of that entrepreneurial stream of income, but it didn't come without sacrifice and it didn't come without certain things that I'm going to let her touch on. So when she's ready, we'll go with it.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about men and women that are in the adult industry. Um, I had a little side quest when I was young, and I studied diamonds and diamond grading, and I went into luxury sales. In fact, I worked for the world's largest engagement ring store in Dallas at one point. And so it's funny, all of those different sales trainings led me into um, a success mindset and entrepreneurial mindset, which unfortunately is something that you need when you are in that industry because it is a self-starting and a self-motivated space. So during the pandemic, I left my relationship with my kid's dad, and we moved from Corpus Christi up to Portland, Oregon. And a little known fact about Portland that I was just telling you last night is Portland is the area of the US that has the largest amount of strip clubs per capita. And so sex work and adult industry work is very mainstream and normalized there. In fact, it never had an effect on my friendships there or on my dating life when I was living there. So I find that to be very interesting. But roundabout, I was in the middle of the pandemic and I had two kids at home. And I had left the quilting industry while I was raising my kids when they were young. And I was very scared of how I was going to raise two kids by myself on a small income. And I started to look for different options where I would have as much time with my kids as I possibly could and without sacrificing the income that I needed in order to provide for them by myself.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've touched base with that too, like we were talking about yesterday. For the people who don't know me, part of my testimony was I would get on Craigslist. I would get on Craigslist and I would list myself, like my features and everything like that. And I would sell photos of myself through Craigslist and just to get diapers, to get wipes, to get food for Aria when she was little, when I was a single mom. And it was just really rooted out of fear. I didn't enjoy it. I mean, it did pay my bills. Like there is a market for it, but I totally and completely understand that it was rooted in fear, not as much as it was rooted in something that you actually like delight in, for lack of better words.
yes, I completely agree. And, as moms, we're going to do anything that we can to ensure that our kids are secure, and sometimes that comes with a sacrifice on our end. And I want to say, I don't in any way, advocate for what I did. In fact, I'm telling this testimony because I want to discourage young women from entering that lifestyle and from coming into agreement with some of the lies that I did when I was involved in that season of my life. And again, I was a newly single parent, and there was a lot of hurt that I had experienced in separating, my family and separating from their dad. And, you know, um, I had, my heart had hardened a lot when it came to relationships. And, I again came into agreement with uh, quite a few lies about relationships and about myself. And one of those was that all men lie and cheat, and that all men are exploitative, and for the first 6 months that I was by myself with the kids, I was very centered and focused on just making their life secure and safe.
Yeah.
And then I did what a lot of people do. And I started to go on like Tinder and different dating sites. We're all locked in our houses. I think a lot of people were, what I come to find, a lot of people left relationships during that time, left jobs, created and ended different identities.
Yeah.
And so here, I was swiping left and right. And it seemed like the same type of person over and over again, married men and men that weren't very serious about relationships. They were more serious about like a physical hookup.
Yeah.
So I already had this like jaded sense about marriage and relationships. And then, I was experiencing these same type of personalities. And so there somewhere a little voice in my head said, well, if this is going to keep happening anyways, you might as well benefit from it. You might as well make it worth your while.
Yeah.
And that's awful. Like that's so awful. And it's just not.
And I was kind of, yeah. I mean, and what's so funny is that you see all these men, they're like, they all act the same, and it's really just the same spirit behind it. It's the same
Yes.
exact spirit behind it. You know what I mean? And like, and for the people that are watching this that are not Christians, like, we hear about the spirits, like the good spirit, Holy Spirit or whatever, and then the bad spirits. There's a spirit behind everything and every motive that a person has, or even like an entity, like an organization or whatever. And the Bible actually tells us to test the spirit behind a thing, but nobody really has the language for that. And so like when you see men that are acting all the same, and like those are just the men that just so happen to be in front of you. You know what I mean?
And
Like,
so
and so it wasn't your fault necessarily that narrative was being formed because it was the only narrative being presented to you. So it was just like, So when we look at the feminist movement and we look at all of that stuff, like it is a lie because it omits the truth to a degree. It's not like, there is a spirit behind the men that act that way. But I mean, there's more to it. Omitting the truth is still a lie. So
Yes.
yes, deep down it is a lie. The all men are the same, all men cheat, nobody takes relationships seriously. It is a lie because I was the same way. And you were like they were exploitive, men are exploitive. I was the opposite and I started exploiting men. And I started using men and I objectified men and I did the very thing that they used to do to me. So, I mean, it can
Yeah.
manifest in two very different ways. Like, you can either hurt them back, which is kind of what I did, like a retaliative, like, what's it called? Spite, like a spiteful nature about you. Or, I mean, like yourself, like you harden and you just kind of disassociate even with your emotional needs. You know what I mean? So,
And what you don't realize, or what I didn't realize, since I can only speak for myself, is that there were two different things coexisting at that time. Those were men that were also unhealed and
mhm,
that were hurt,
yes.
that had experienced trauma. I had experienced a lot of early trauma in my life that was not addressed and healed. I just kind of almost like putting a blanket over a fire,
Yeah.
and just kind of, the fire went out, but I really didn't clean the mess. And what I didn't realize is that I had a spirit as well, an orphan spirit, and a spirit of, feeling abandoned, not feeling loved and accepted. I had been bullied as a kid. I, had some difficult family stuff that I had gone through, early childhood sexual abuse. And it was all of those things were almost like this perfect storm that finally came to its apex, in my early 30s. And I remember very much going after emotionally unavailable men. And I didn't even realize it until my mother-in-law had told me one day, like, you are just as emotionally unavailable
Yes.
as the men that you're seeking, and I wasn't ready to hear that on a spiritual level. Like, I knew it, but I didn't understand,
Yeah, you didn't have a
where,
grid for it. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And I was also in denial, like, that's not me. Like, I'm fine, everything's fine, we're great over here, but I wasn't, and it wasn't. So another side quest I went on when I was young, is I used to model for fine art painters. So I was used to being nude in front of people, and comfortable in that space while artists would learn how to draw the figure.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was not easy, but kind of easy for me to segue into from going to that to starting to participate in. And at this time, we're talking 2021. OnlyFans had been around for several years at this point. Many women had made incomes doing it, and it wasn't quite as sensationalized as it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I started to kind of think about, how does this fit in with my lifestyle? My kids were just about to get to school. So it gave me some time during the day to, do things by myself. Um, and that led into the seed being planted of, this is something I'm willing to pursue. And then the when I was younger, I was approached by a man named Dennis Hoff, and he had offered me a space in the legal brothels in Nevada. When I was modeling in the early 2000s, there were several different websites that amateur models could go on to seek out photographers for editorial shoots.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking nothing. There was nothing even like remotely pornographic with what I was doing back then. But I was approached by this man, said,
Yeah.
this is the type of business that I offer. it's all safe and legal and this and that, and we will fly you out to Nevada, and this is, what that entails. You're going to make so much money, and da 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 da. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I wasn't ready to do that, so I declined that offer. Well, many years later, Dennis died, but the brothels were still in business,
For sure.
and and so I was thinking to myself, this is maybe a way for me to secure finances for my kids. And again, my heart and heart, I wasn't concerned about um, the effects of what that business would do, not just to me, to my children, to the men and the families that are also involved on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So funny, not funny, but funny kind of
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. And interestingly enough, my mom passed away in 2013. And when my mom died, my dad went on a journey of like spiritual discovery.
Yeah.
And he went through like New Age movement and this and that. Roundabout ended up becoming, but he ended up reintegrating back into the church. And at the time that I was pursuing legal sex work, my dad was being ordained as a Baptist deacon. So the irony of this is not
Oh.
lost on me.
Yeah.
The first
Yeah.
the first brothel tour I went to, I drove from Portland to Sacramento, where I'm from, and
Yeah.
went to my father's deacon ordination, left the kids with my dad, and drove straight to Nevada to pursue this first tour at the brothel. Like now I look back on it and it's you can't write a script this ridiculous,
No.
So
Yeah.
here I am. Yeah, I'm in my church clothes driving to Nevada, which is a considerable drive. It was about an 8-hour drive from Sacramento to Southern Nevada. And it's late at night. And if you've never been to the desert night is really dark. Like
Yeah.
it's pitch black, and it's a 2-lane highway. There are very few landmarks and rest stops in between a certain point of, from Northern Nevada to Southern Nevada. And it's just all land and it's all desert. And I
Yeah.
remember like thinking to myself, I'm in my car and, I just remember thinking, like, I am driving straight into the pits of hell right now. Like, this is what I'm doing, And then I remember thinking, well, there's no turning back now. Here I am. And I love this and hate this about myself is when I make a commitment to do something, I'm going to do it. I keep my word. So I'm like, well, you said you were going to do this. Like, we're just going to do it. Maybe this will just be like our one time and we'll just find out what it's like. And if we hate it, we can leave. So, and I remember thinking to myself how dark it was outside. And I drive an okay car, but I just remember thinking like, if my car breaks down here or if something unsafe happens to me, like I'm in the middle of nowhere and, no one will find me. And the real fear of that kind of set in of, I'm putting myself in a situation,
Yeah.
but
Like it hit you at that moment. Yeah.
yeah. And it's funny. So Georgia, you and I have this in common.
Okay. So as I wait for Jessica to come back, the devil is a whole liar and doesn't want us to do this, and that's fine. There she is. Perfect. All right, you there?
I'm here.
All right, I already have it recorded. I just said the devil's a whole liar and kicked us off. So
Loser.
we're not going to let him steal our joy. We're going to keep moving forward and we're going to get this testimony out there. So
Awesome. Do you
you're
want me to recap or do you
no,
want me
you
to?
have the floor wherever you left off.
All right. So where we just left off, I'm, driving to my first tour at the brothel. And it's the night of my dad's deacon ordination. And here I am. And when you go there, it is run very professionally, I
Mm-hmm.
will say. But it is also kind of I mean, I'm just going to give it to you straight. I think that that's illegal pimping. I
Yeah.
think there's legal loopholes that they go through, but essentially whether you are there voluntarily or not, it's illegal pimping.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the ranches, like the first one that I worked at, you are locked in for 2 weeks. You cannot leave the premises for anything, except for one day a week for like 3 hours where you can go to town. Um, so some interesting facts about legal brothel workers is you have to get a sheriff's card, which is a legal permit where they run your federal background. You are tested for, sexually transmitted infections once a week. You are required to use protection.
Wow.
And each person is an independent contractor, so they say, but you are essentially expected to work 24/7. You're expected to be on call the entire time that you're there.
Yeah.
And you are, there are anywhere between 10 and 20 women that you're working with at the same time, and they try to pick women from different demographics. So it's like the United Colors of Benetton there. You've got women in every nationality, every body type,
Yeah.
to suit the needs of their clients. And then I look back on this now and it's so dehumanizing. You go in, if a man wants to see all of the women that are there, he puts you in what's called a lineup. And you literally go into the parlor, you line up side by side, introduce yourselves. One of the ranches I worked at, there was a mirror behind you so they could get a 360 view of your body. You're treated the same. It's like picking out meat at a grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
and then you are made to negotiate with this person and you set your own price, and then you complete your service and you leave. And it's
Yeah.
very casual and normalized. And for most people that have been in a traditional relationship or have not lived in that lifestyle, it is like a complete shock to your system of just how easy
Well, it's
and
traumatizing. Yeah. Like I mean,
yeah,
it traumatizes you, your mind, your body, everything. Like, I
you
mean, even witnessing.
yeah, and it changes your brain chemistry. It changes everything to where
Yeah.
you start to look at, sorry, it's my cat. You start to look at every man becomes a dollar sign on their head. You start to think of what am I going to receive from this, and in order to survive those situations, you have to shut down any and all emotion. So,
Absolutely. I would assume.
and
Yeah.
and the crazy thing is, the women that participate are broken women.
Yeah.
I don't know a single girl that I worked with in the industry that wasn't sexually abused or neglected in some ways. Parents were on drugs, whatever,
Yeah.
grew up in poverty, sexually abused by their parents, by family,
Yeah.
by, a lot of women with church hurt too. Um, and then you think about, the clients that are receiving these services and they are just as broken. These are, men that are, dealing with abandonment and rejection issues that have reduced themselves to a lie that they came into agreement with. So here we are. We're on two sides of this. And on one side, there's the lie of all men cheat, all men lie, all men are exploitative.
Yeah.
Men are not worth an emotional investment unless there's a transaction involved. And then recently, as I was going through inner healing work with our pastor, there was another layer that I realized, the lie that I came into agreement with of I have to earn validation, love, acceptance. It's
Yeah.
an earned situation. It's not, it's not, it has to be a transaction, and
Yeah.
then on
Because
the other
that's how
side,
it's
you have,
been. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then on the other side, you have men that are, I am not worthy of love unless I pay for it.
Yeah.
So two broken people, two broken sides, which is exactly what, to me, the devil's like, this is the perfect storm for me to come in
Yeah.
and work my magic. Um, and I was, and here's the other thing. The women in there were very encouraging. They were like, "Hey, let me put you on some game. Let me teach you the tricks of the trade here, so to speak." And so I was taught, get a Twitter account, start working the internet, start to build up a following. And, coming from sales, coming from,
Yeah.
having built a following in the sewing and quilting industry, which again, totally weird. Here we're going from like ladies in church hats to, like the bordello. It's just interesting. So then most of the women there would have OnlyFans as well, because if you couldn't afford to take a trip to the desert, you could still pay for service, and
Yeah.
stream your biggest with this person, because the whole thing is just a complicated case of escapism and addiction,
Yes.
So men become addicted to this fantasy woman. It becomes an escape for them of not having to face rejection ever again, because as long as your person is existing in only a fantasy world, then you can stay there and escape there for as long as you want.
Yeah.
It's just like anything else.
Well, it's pay to
It's like
play.
it's pay to play, right? And then on the other side, I never have to connect emotionally and be hurt by a man ever again, because I'll never let one in a way that makes me emotionally vulnerable.
Absolutely.
So we're just one hand's washing the other.
Yeah.
And everyone involved is empty. It's a vessel that just is dried up. And I remember, you know, over the course of 2 years, I became a person that I didn't recognize. And I was miserable. And your whole identity shifts into someone who is pretending to have a great time, because you want to be the life of the party, so that people will think, well, she's a really fun girl to be around. I
Yeah.
want to be part of that light, and you're miserable. And then there's this other, and I want to just talk about this, because everything you see on the internet is done under a veil of some kind, whether it's social media parents that, project the perfect family, whether it's, fashion influencer, whether it's OnlyFans, whatever. Everyone's pretending to have a great time. Nobody sees what's going on behind the scenes to create the facade, you
Absolutely.
know? So there becomes this facade of everyone's making money. We're all just rolling in the dough. We're all got our Louis V's. And, there were times where women are posing for pictures on Twitter, with their Louis Vuitton, and they're also posting a GoFundMe later because they're broke. I mean, it's easy, fast, quick money, but the faster it came to you, the faster you spend it, because you just think it's coming in all the time, no matter what. And it's not. It's like any other industry. There's economic uncertainty in it. So that was another lie that I came into agreement, was like, I'm just going to cash out. And once I'm done, like, I'll be able to move forward. And,
Yeah.
so my co-parent found out what I was doing, and
Hmm.
like outed me to our parents, to our community. And I, being in a feminist space mindset, I was like, well, I'm going to out myself and share with everyone what I'm doing, because then I can take power of my narrative. So I was very open and honest with my community about what I was doing, and it came at a great price.
I'm sure it
I
did.
lost a lot. I lost relationships. I lost members of my family that, are estranged from me and don't want to communicate with me because of the shame that they felt of what I was doing.
Wow.
It's really hard.
That is very hard. That is very hard. And I feel like, I mean, for me, when I was, selling pictures on Craigslist, like it was before the OnlyFans thing. I mean, thank Jesus Christ that OnlyFans wasn't a thing when I was in that moment. But
Yeah.
I mean, honestly though, because like I mean, I like the Craigslist thing, like the money came just enough for me to provide for Aria. But like even then, like it wasn't even enough for me to keep pursuing it. I didn't do it very long, but I hated every second of it. And Yeah, I did the modeling thing. I did alternative modeling in Nashville for a very short season with photographers from Inked magazine and stuff like that. And like, I mean, I wasn't dressed, and I like, and I'm
You're
posting
exposed.
pictures. Yeah. And I kind of did the same thing because I had gone through quite a bit of trauma myself, not necessarily the same as you, but I don't think it necessarily has to be put on you. It's the coat of trauma doesn't have to be put on you the same way
It's
as
not one
somebody
size fits
else
all.
for it to manifest in the same way. Like
Yeah.
I had cancer twice, and my ex-boyfriend cheated on me and told me that's why he did it. And like honestly, it was just a way out of the relationship, and that's fine. I've forgiven that and moved forward. But in that moment, it like really traumatized me. So it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to take back my narrative. I'm going to take back my power. Like, I'm going to get the validation externally that I want to get because he rejected me. And I believed the lie that I was broken, even though like it was cervical cancer and like physically, like it didn't even make sense. Like that, because he was like, you can't have children anymore. And I was like, that's not how this works. And like, but it was so hurtful that I actually like came into agreement with the lie with him. And so it's like,
Yeah.
well, if I'm already broken, what does it matter? If I'm already
Yeah.
broken and I'm just a baby making machine, because that's how I felt in that moment, um, like I'm not making any more babies, but like I'm just gonna behave that way. And actually right before that moment, or right after that moment, like I had decided to like end my own life. And I wrote like I was at work. You know what I mean? Like it's the whole showing up and like smiling and everything like that. And I was at work, like you don't have to be on social media to put on a face. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm smiling and like super happy and being kind to everybody, simultaneously writing letters to my entire family. But
Yeah.
and thank God that I asked God in that moment, driving home because I had made a whole plan that I'm not going to get into for social media purposes, but like I made this whole plan and I was like, if nobody stops me before I walk outside of my house, like I'm going to do it in the driveway. And like I was on my way to pick up my daughter, who was a year and a half, 2 years old at the time. Like it was just like completely irrational, but I was so traumatized and hurt that I was just like, I'm done. I'm
You
done.
just want to stop. Yeah.
I
You
just
don't
wanted
actually
to
want to
stop.
die. You just want to
Yeah.
kill off the pain, right? So when whether you are doing that in a professional setting or
Mm-hmm.
whether you're doing it just on Craigslist or on a,
Right.
random moment, you're shifting an identity.
Absolutely.
You're changing your identity. You're creating an alter ego in order to perform those things, And so
Absolutely.
with working girls, for security purposes and for entertainment purposes, you create a new name. You give yourself a new name, you give yourself a new identity. And, there was a huge difference between Miller, party girl, and Jessica, single mom, broken down single mom,
Yeah.
Um, and that was a hard thing to break off when the time came for me to stop being sick and tired and to, reintegrate back into who God said I was, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I ended up leaving Portland, and I couldn't sustain that lifestyle, and I didn't want it to affect my parenting. Of course, my kids were always number one,
Yeah.
whether that is, seen or not. So I moved in with my dad, and my dad and I have a very difficult relationship. It's just one of those things. God's still working on it. And my dad was very angry, of course, that I didn't just have this radical encounter with the Lord and just we snapped our fingers and everything's great, and I'm not a hooker anymore, I guess.
Yeah.
So I remember being in his kitchen. The kids are at school. He's gone at Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat on the ground and I was just like, at that point I didn't even believe in God. I had been telling my son that like God was a myth, Jesus was a
Mhm.
myth, like the way like the Greek gods are myths.
Yeah.
And so they're, getting a different message from their family than from what they're getting from me. Sat on the ground and I'm like, listen, and I'm just talking out loud. I'm like, I don't know if you are real or not.
Yeah.
But if you are, take me out of this place. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be who I am anymore. And I would love to say that all of a sudden, like the ceiling flew off the house and the sky parted and God, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. It wasn't like that.
No.
It wasn't this like instant shift. It wasn't like, and magically she was healed. There was a lot of grit and grace that had to occur in order for that transformation. And, I'd had some other setbacks at that time that had forced me to really look inside myself,
Yeah.
and really understand like that I had put myself here, and you can sit here and blame daddy didn't love me, got cheated on, times are tough, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, whatever. Those just were um places that I could put my self pity.
Hmm.
It wasn't actually, all of those things are surmountable at some point, you know.
Yeah.
So I just prayed on it. I really did. I prayed on it and then I let it go and I never talked to him again. But I was still like going to church a little bit with my dad. He really wanted me. And, I say this with love. Like, we're all on our own healing journey, but my
Absolutely.
dad was not he wasn't a very available parent growing up. He never really, like, my dad never went to our basketball games or our school events or, watched my sister do her horseback riding.
Yeah.
But when my mom died, he projected this image of this totally present and amazing father to the church, and it was this veneer to kind of, I think, make himself feel better. So he was presenting me to the church, like, look at my daughter. She's saved. She's great. Look at what
Yeah.
Jesus has done. But there wasn't any real work being done at home, and
Right.
there, I started to develop a lot of church hurt over the hypocrisy that I felt in that moment of, here I am, like, crying out for help, asking for resources, looking for, a way out. And that whole idiom of like, okay, thoughts and prayers was all that I was getting. And I
Right.
remember having a conversation with this woman that went to my dad's church and she started to speak the gospel to me. And this is where I think it's important to be under the right leadership and to have the right mentors. Okay. And I just want to say, what we have at our church is amazing and it's been like so
Absolutely.
healing. We'll talk about that. But in this moment, she's telling me the story in John chapter 4 about the woman at the well, which, if you're not familiar with the story, Jesus goes to Jacob's well. There's a Samaritan woman there, and she is asking him for water. And she is a woman of loose morals. She was an adulteress. She'd had 5 husbands. The whole town had seen her like as a social pariah, right? And
Yeah.
she herself saw herself as unlovable, unhealable. So she was going to the well at an inconvenient time of the day when nobody else would be there. She encounters Jesus, and Jesus speaks to her, and he says, like, I know this is, part of this is who you are. And then he speaks identity into her of who he says she is. But the way that it was spoken to me, was emphasized on the part of that parable where Jesus tells her, go and sin no more.
Absolutely.
So this woman is hammering into me, go and sin no more. That's what Jesus says. But you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
How do I do that? What does that look like? You can't radically shift your identity until you understand the why behind what you're doing.
And just like, and not even that either, when Jesus came to preach I mean, he preached the gospel on the mount. It was his first sermon. And he said, repent for the kingdom of God is at hand. And repent means to change the way that you think, to completely turn around and go in an opposite direction. But it wasn't until that moment when he presented a different option through love and demonstration and through the word of God, all of those things came together. But, the greatest of those things is love. And then that's when he packaged it up and said, this is the next option. Like, this is who I say you are. And I think that the religious church, like, and I say this with love as well, because I was really religious. And I think that's why I'm called to this situation is like, I was
Yeah.
radically changed. And I grew up in a house where I got the most praise when I performed the best. So it
Yes.
was performance based. And then I found like this list. Oh, this God loves me if I do all this. Well, if I check all of these on the list and I don't do all of these, then I'm okay. And
Yeah.
I just became very religious. And like in religion, like it strips joy and it strips love. And then you become rigid, you become cold, and you become hard. And it's not on purpose. It's just, it's not the right source. So you have all of these people saying, oh, go and sin no more. Like, what does that even mean? Like, if I were to just like come, like, what if I didn't even understand, like, what is sin? Like, oh,
And the greatest sin of all is pride.
yeah, it's all pride.
You
It's
know,
all pride that shows up differently. And, you know, like, what's it called? They just don't know. And so, like, those that don't have like a radical encounter with Jesus and they don't even know their identity themselves and they find identity in that list, like, it's also hard for them to speak identity. So, for me, at least, there is some type of grace there. Like, like, and it took me a while to get that. And, like, how you said, like, out of love, like, this is the situation with my family. Like, it's
and
like,
it turned away. Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't, I was like, if this is what this is all about, count me out, bro. I'd rather be a hooker than a hypocrite, which neither of those things are great. Those are neither identities that there's not a cloak I want to wear at all. But it wasn't until I had made the decision to move back to Texas, to try to give the children a chance to have a relationship with their father's side of the family and to have a little bit more support for myself so that I could get away from what I had built, on the West Coast. Which the
absolutely.
West Coast, culturally speaking, is very different than the South.
It
Um, you
is.
know, very normalized there. Everything I was doing was very normal. So I came out here and I was looking for a space for myself. I had started to think about what life would be like if I had a relationship with God again.
Yeah.
Um, and I posted in my friendly neighborhood Facebook group. I said, "Hey, I'm looking for a church, but I have a lot of church hurt. So I want to shop around and find the right place for me to fit in." And I remember going into this thinking to myself, I don't want anyone to know who I used to be.
Mm,
At this
yeah.
point, summer of 2023, I had gone for my last tour at the brothel. The kids were on summer vacation with their grandparents, and it was like a shoe that didn't fit anymore. And I was like, I'm never going to do this again. Right. So by October of 23, I woke up one morning, I called my best friend. I'm like, hey, I deleted my Twitter, I deleted my OnlyFans, I deleted everything. And he was like, what, why, like what made you decide? I'm like, I was just done. Like there was no, like, it was just, I woke up one day and I knew I was ready to let go of that false identity.
Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't even realize this when it was happening. Right. Like I see it
Yeah.
now, like, wow. So there came a period of grief for the alter ego I had created. She'd become like a part of me, a part of who I saw myself as. So when I
Yeah.
was finally ready to let her go, got to lunch with my friend, and he had been doing some of my video work too when I was streaming adult content and doing all that. And
Mhm.
we go to lunch. We go to this is so funny. Shout out to Visconti's. We go to Visconti's, which is this like Italian restaurant in Folsom, right? Very much a part of my youth going to this restaurant. And we're eating minestrone soup, and he says to me, So this is the part where you tell me like you're gonna quit the lifestyle, right? He already knew. He knew before I did. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I think I'm done. And he said, okay, so this is like Miller's like her wake, you
Mm.
know? And so we we clink our glasses. We gave her a proper burial, you know? Um, and we let the dead bury the dead.
Amen.
We moved on.
Amen.
And it was easy right then and there to let go. It served its purpose in my life. And then came the hardest part, which was the cleanup.
Yeah.
Like going back into an industry like sewing and quilting, like we're talking a very conservative,
Yeah.
mostly religious, you know. There was a lot of judgment, none of which I've ever heard. No one's ever said anything negative to my face, but I imagine that they've said a lot of things behind me, which is understandably so. Um, I'm okay with that because I understand, you know, that was such a radical shift for people to see. But I had a friend who had heard that I was moving back to Texas, and she said, "We're moving to Texas too. Like, where are you going to
Mhm.
move?" I'm like, "New Braunfels." She's like, "No way, we're moving to New Braunfels."
I love
So
it.
when I had when no one else, it's like that. You'd never eat lunch in this town again. I remember one of the hardest parts about leaving the adult industry was like the other lie I came into agreement with is I can never be redeemed. My
Mm.
career cooked, reputation
Well,
burnt.
that's what they
You
tell
know,
each other, isn't it? That's what they
yeah,
tell